So I'm sure you might be wondering at this point, what kind of person is the enlightened person? It might seem that because they've escaped all attachment, that they've escaped all care, that they don't care anymore, that their attachment is kind of like this Vulcan, stoic, cold and cool way of dealing with other people. But the Buddha claims no, just the opposite, that the enlightened person, through ultimate enlightenment, is ultimately compassionate and ultimately caring. That might seem like a contradiction until you understand the nature of enlightenment and rethink through what the kind of reality is that the enlightened person is witness to and in direct union with. Remember, that is the recognition of the codependence of everything on everything else. The best picture of it is what is called Indra's web. Now, if you think about a spider's web, that spider's web is a net. And each node in the net is connected through strings to every other node. And you can think of each individual in the universe as just nodes in that net, which means that they aren't really individuals, they're just the intersection of every relationship that they have. And thus, every node is dependent on every other node. And in Indra's web, what you have is at each node a mirror the shape of a 3D diamond. And therefore, what gives each individual their individuality, their essence, is that they reflect every other portion of the web on their individual perspective. So, what is my perspective? My perspective is everything else. What is the other's individuality? Everything else. And so each thing reflects everything else and therefore is constituted by everything else. Every individual, being codependent, is therefore empty of individual existence. Their very individuality is their reflection of everything else. Just like the node of the web is nothing more than the set of its relationships. So once you understand that, experientially, you realize that the distinction between you and I, between even me and my dog, is empty. There's no real distinction. Everything is equally codependent, and it's the codependence and mutual reflection that's the heart of their individuality, their existence, which means that really I am not different than you. The way the Buddha puts it is everything has Buddha nature. And so the heart of each being is the same. Each of us stand together or fall together because each of us are like nodes on that web that don't exist except as reflections of everything else. So once I understand the emptiness of distinctions, I realize that I and you are not different from each other. And therefore, if I'm going to save myself from suffering, I necessarily have to save you. And if you are going to save yourself from suffering, you necessarily have to save me. There's no I without you, and there's no you without me. Well, then I desire to gain knowledge, to gain this enlightenment, to free myself from attachment. And in doing so, I realize that your suffering is mine, don't I? That without the relieving of your suffering, I cannot relieve mine. And so therefore, this wisdom is compassion. Because what is compassion but co-suffering? It is the suffering of the other's pain in yourself and the desire to relieve that suffering in yourself by relieving it in others. So when I am not different than you, then care for myself is care for you. And True wisdom is the recognition that there is no difference, and therefore, if I'm going to achieve nirvana, I have to achieve it not just for myself, but for everyone else. And this has led to the ideal person in Buddhism, who is called the Bodhisattva, the one who makes a vow to save all sentient life from suffering. Now, the crucial thing to understand is to distinguish it from the popular understanding of the Bodhisattva vow. The popular understanding is that a Bodhisattva is someone who's on the verge of enlightenment and nirvana, but refuses to enter nirvana because they want to save everyone else. That is misleading because it makes it seem as if that desire to save everyone else is different from achieving nirvana. But in fact, it's that enlightenment itself which is the desire to save everyone else. There is no self-salvation without other salvation. We're all one in this. And so therefore, to save myself is to save others. To desire to save only myself and not others is a sign that I am not enlightened. I don't understand the true nature of reality. A great story that shows this is one that involves the most famous bodhisattva in the Far East, and that's Avalokiteshvara. Avalokiteshvara is considered the bodhisattva of compassion, and he, in Tibet, is considered the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama is considered the reincarnation of the bodhisattva of compassion in each generation. What happens is, as Buddhism spreads into China, the legends of Avalokiteshvara change, and Avalokiteshvara transmutes to Guan Yin, and Guan Yin is a female bodhisattva of compassion. So we see that it's very instructive here because this bodhisattva undergoes a sex change. Again, not strange in Buddhism, precisely because the distinctions between self and other, between being this way and that way, are empty of any real significance. They're only perspectival distinctions, relational distinctions. And so that the bodhisattva can be seen as male or female is again very symbolic of the Buddhist ideal. So Guan Yin is the head of this, is the center or main character of this story, of a man who is very wicked and evil in this life. He is a murderer, he is a sex trafficker, he owns a lot of land and has stolen a lot of money and oppressed all of his servants and landholders and tenants, and he's corrupt, and he dies. And he goes to the lowest Buddhist hell, a hell that is so disgusting that the punishment in this hell for your sins is to be buried up to your head in crap that is burning the temperature of the sun. And while that is happening and you're trying to get yourself out of that crap, demons with pitchforks are stabbing at your flesh and tearing it off your body and as it regenerates itself in thousands of years of this kind of torture. So Guan Yin sees and looks down through all of the heavens into the many levels of earthly existence, all the way down into the depths, and sees this man suffering and has compassion on him. She's the bodhisattva of compassion. So she allows from her hand a little web, a string of a web, a wisp, to go through all of the levels of existence, all the way down to that lowest level. And that man looks up and sees this little web coming to him within his reach. He grabs at it, desperate, not believing it will hold him. But lo and behold, it pulls him up. So he grabs onto it, so happy that he's going to be saved from this perdition. And as he's going up, he feels his body getting heavier, lighter. He looks down and he sees two people, each have grabbed one of his legs. And he looks at the web, he looks at these people, and he says, there's no way it's going to hold all of us. So he starts to shake to try to get them off, but they won't come off. They're desperate too. And then he gets heavier, and he looks as he gets higher, that the whole chain of people, each grabbing each other's legs and grabbing his, so that 2 people have grabbed the legs of those who grabbed his legs, and 2 people have grabbed each of the legs of them, so that pretty soon the web is pulling up almost the entire group of damned people. Well, he's not going to have this. No way is he going to allow these freeloaders to get him pulled back into the hell, because this web won't hold us up, all of us. It's just a little web. I'm surprised it's holding me up. So he starts shaking more and more, trying very hard, and people are falling off, but not everyone. So he figures, if I just shake one more time with all of my strength, then I will be able to shake these people off, and then the web will be, my body will be light enough for this web to pull me up to salvation. So he gives it just one more shake, and that shake is so hard that it rips the web. And not only do they fall down, but he falls down with them, entangled in the web of suffering that is his existence. His selfishness prevented him from seeing that his salvation was only possible if he saved everyone else. If he had just stayed still, that web would have pulled him up. And by pulling him up, pull everyone up. For we're all connected, and no one can escape suffering without relieving everyone else of their suffering. So the Buddhist sage, the truly wise, enlightened one, is not uncaring and detached in the sense of someone who doesn't care. In fact, it's that very detachment from self and from ego that allows him to understand his connection to everyone else, a connection that is so close that to save the self, I must save everyone. For I and you are just reflections of each other. I am not anything without you, and you are not anything without me, and we really are not anything. And until we realize that, no true compassion is possible, and therefore no true alleviation of suffering.